with spring ball starting this week, I thought it would be a good idea to kind of break down, give some positions, some names, some battles possibly to watch out for during spring ball, which runs from Monday through April 18th, culminating with the spring game. I'm sure more details for that will be released as the time comes. Looking offensively, our running back is a position where, well, we suffered a lot of attrition there through graduations and departures. Fortunately for us, we returned all Dev Matthews there, so no real concern about who the main bell cow is. But that number 2 back is a couple of pair of redshirt freshmen, Marquise Harris from Lawton MacArthur and Terry Simmons from Carl Albert, vying for that spot. Now, you would ask me, okay, Smooth, at this point, if you had to take a gander on who has the early lead or things of that nature going into it, I would say Marquise Harris, just based off of, number one, he saw action in that Missouri Western game, looked really good in that Missouri Western game. It was similar to Will Mason 2023 against Lincoln, where I said you have to discount the opponent and the time in the game where the carries are coming and kind of focus more so on how he's running the ball. And I thought Marquis showed he has good blend of speed and power, good vision, good patience. I think there's a lot to like there. And then when you look at Terry Simmons, I think he was banged up some, and we weren't able to really see. But I remember at a Carl Albert, I was very impressed. It's a very good program. We've had a great track record of Carl Albert Titans over the years. And so that's a position I would look out for, see who kind of has a hold on that number 2 job or maybe is trending more towards being that number 2 back coming out of spring, heading into fall camp. When I look at the receivers, this is something that it's complicated, and I talked about it in depth several times before. If you just want names to look out, see if they can take the next step, I would look at, number one, I would look at senior Javon Thomas. I think we saw flashes there. He has the height, weight, speed. He can make the tough catch as we saw. To me, he could be a valuable weapon over the middle, similar to how Madison Ridgeway was for us for many years. But I think we just got to get consistency there. I feel like there were times where, he'd have 3 catches and you're like, okay, this is very good. And then he have a game where he might have 1. And so we've got to get consistency there from him. I look at a Hagen Hacker as well. I think Hagen Hacker is a big play waiting to happen. It's just, can we consistently get that? And then the man I'm most intrigued with, and I would focus on solely, and if you listened last year, especially early on, you would kind of know my feelings on this. That sophomore Zayden Martinez, the Kansas State transfer, because when he's 6'4", he's got speed, he's a typical height, weight, speed guy, and we just didn't see it last year. He had that massive catch against Pitt State, and you were hoping that would get the man going, but it never did. He only had 1 catch the rest of the way. And it was disheartening because you just, with that size and that speed, you would have liked to see more of an impact. And I said in hindsight, okay, he was a redshirt freshman. Maybe I was too critical of the man. So, I'm wiping the slate clean there. I want to see steps. Is he trending towards being the player that we heard, that we saw in that inter-squad scrimmage prior to the start of the season last year? Are we seeing that out of him? Because if we are, I think that will go a long way towards helping a unit that severely underachieved last year outside of 2 men. Okay. So that's what I would be looking for mainly within that room. Now, you could say the room as a whole. And if you want my full breakdown on that, check out this full spring preview episode on Spotify. The link is below in the description there. I go down position by position, in grave detail. When we look at tight end, I would look at how Andrew Carney is fitting in there, more so how he's being utilized because, he did move there, but he got hurt a few games into last year, took a medical red shirt, right? We're losing all-conference guy. Dom Dunn was a big part of our success in the past game, especially, in the middle, in the intermediate game. Right? Are we using Andrew in a similar role? Like I think that we could, and I'm sure Andrew's 3 inches shorter than what Dom is. But I think in terms of what you're looking for in the pass game, he can provide because hopefully, if I can recall here, you're seeing, his ability to catch the football. He's hard to bring down. He runs hard. He runs with good pad level. So I'd just be curious to see how he's being utilized there. That would be the main thing I would look for within that tight end room. You want to look on the offensive line? I mean, you could look at it as a whole. But to me, the most interesting thing I'd look at is Junior Cameron Brannicky, who we know has been a backup center to Gabe the past couple of years, is he getting looks at guard possibly? And if he is, number one, how is he looking there? And number two, how is redshirt freshman De'Mondre Tasby II looking? Now, if you recall last year for signing day, I was very high on Tasby II. I thought it push come to shove, and he had to play, that I thought he could do a sufficient enough job as a true freshman playing in the trenches in the MIAA. And so I'm just in general, I'm intrigued to see now with the redshirt year, a year in the weight room, a year of development, how he's looking because Gabe is a senior, and I don't think, based on the film I saw, why he couldn't be a 3-year starter for us and why he couldn't push Cameron for that starting job this time next year once Gabe does graduate. Okay, so that to me is kind of the most important thing I'm looking at when it comes to the offensive line. Is Cameron Brannicky getting looks at guard? Because I felt like coming out of high school, he could do both. And if that's the case, how is De'Mondre Tasby II looking at center? On the defensive line, I would look at mainly who is going to be starting opposite of all conference in Cameron Dunn. Because to me, there's two worthy and proven options there in senior captain Zachary Stillwell and then junior Ethan Steins, who kind of emerged down the stretch last year as a converted linebacker and now junior from Berry Hill. Right? I think both men have shown, number one, they've shown the ability to provide a consistent pass rush. They've shown an ability to, when they get to the quarterback, to bring down the quarterback. They've shown an ability to be sufficient to good enough against the run to be out there for all 3 downs. The only problem is only one of them can be starting because you're not going to not start Cameron Dunn. I would find that hard to believe that Coach Swanson's not going to start an all-conference guy. So that is the position I would look forward to the most because I feel like you could make a case for either one of them. And regardless, I mean, I imagine they'll both get a lot of snaps the way Coach Swanson rotates. That would be the number one thing I would look at, as well as looking at maybe seeing how Junior Servant Counselor is looking. You recall last year, he looked very good the first half of the season, then kind of gradually fell down the depth chart, kind of seeing if he's coming back to form there. When we look at linebacker, I think the biggest thing is who's replacing Jack Puckett and who is replacing Connor Johnson. I think Reese Roller is probably penciled in as a starter, but you've got other options. Most notably, there's Hank Puckett, who I think a lot of us, myself included, were very high on when he signed. We were very high on last year in the reps that he got on defense and special teams, and you'd like to think would probably position himself to be a starter. And I would also look to see how is Kaisenberg, the senior, for more by way of Bishop McGinnis. How is he coming back from that injury that kind of hampered him some last year? Because you go back to 2024, I thought he was a very good rotational guy for us. And I think, now as the senior, not only from a leadership point of view, but also just in terms of he has a chance to finally become a full-time starter here. This is a very big spring for him as well. So that's what I would look at there. And then in terms of the defensive backs, we do return a lot, but we're also losing a lot as well. Willie Rice Jr., that's probably the biggest one. He was an all-conference corner, was very good for us. If you want names to look at, I would first and foremost would be Antoine Gilbreath Jr. I think he's kind of polarizing some last year, at least to me, because there were times, you go back to that Curry game, he had that wild interception in the end zone. You go back to Pitt State, he did have that, 70, 80-yard interception return, right? Where you're saying, okay, he's 6'1", he has ball skills, he has the athleticism, but then there were other times where he got beat. Even if you look at that interception he had against Pitt State, and I pointed it out then, he got beat on that play, right? He got beat inside on the slant. It was just a poorly thrown football that was thrown behind the open man. And I give Antoine credit. He was able to pick it off and make the play, but he was still beat, right? I would look at, is he becoming more consistent? Can he take the next step there? Because I think losing Connor Ashley, losing Daniel Ekweese, and losing Willie Rice, we definitely need corners to step up there. And Antoine, being a guy that played a lot as a young guy last year, you would like to think logically would take the next step there. That is who my attention will be on first and foremost. I would also look at Dalton Hurd and David Williams. D. Will was slowed some last year by injuries. But the 2024 D. Will, again, see Missouri Western, man, saved the season there. Okay, if we can get back to that, D. Will, I think that'll help the defense a ton. I think we saw that in spurts last year, and when we did, I think we saw the defense just kick it up a notch too. And then Dalton Hurd's a guy I felt like we had a drop there in consistency from 2024 to 2025. If we can get back to that consistency where he was making plays, making PBUs, making tackles, making the passing lanes tough for the quarterback consistently, that will also help too. So those would be the three guys I would look at there. And in kicking, there's a battle between sophomore Greg McDonald and redshirt freshman Ethan Spywalk. We know the kicking struggles last year, right? So, you're hoping for better, and we have two kickers that have yet to actually, I know Ethan has some kickoffs, but to actually kick an extra point or field goal in a collegiate game. So I would keep an eye on that. How are we looking? What is the range? Things of that nature. And then finally, I would look at the return game, because as we know that we had excuse me, we had a significant drop from 2024 to 2025. Now, is it surprising that we had a drop given what we lost? No. But I was surprised it was to that degree where it felt like the return game was non-existent. So I would just see who we have back there. Are we seeing improvements from the group that we currently have, or are we going to come to the conclusion that those speedsters that we signed at wide receiver, we signed at defensive back, they have an opportunity to come in and fall and carve out a role there? But those are just a few of the names and positions I would keep an eye out on throughout spring. We'll be back at some point during spring with a live stream update. It's always a ton of fun. I will have more details about that when the time comes. But if you would like my full near hour-long breakdown, each position, more in-depth, again, the spring preview episode is out now on Spotify. The link for that is below in the description. But again, we will be back for the spring update with a couple of shows. So until that time, thank you for watching. Roll Chos.